You are in for a treat today. We are going to be interviewing Sarah Rosensweet, and she is a peaceful parenting coach. I got the joy of journeying with her as we learned from Dr. Markham. But what I think you'll love about this conversation is Sarah is going to discuss how lately in our culture, gentle parenting, peaceful parenting, these kind of terms have really been given a lot of negative connotation. And so she's passionate about reimagining what peaceful parenting can be. And she's also going to share 3 key components of peaceful parenting that if you do those today, no matter what age your kids are right now, it is never too late to start. So she's going to give you these 3 key concepts, and she's going to share with you how, man, she's got some kids that have grown up, 3 kids of her own. They're into adulthood and been raised this way. And just, I want you to hear the fruit and the outcomes of what it could look like whenever you truly come alongside your kid and parent them with peacefulness, with kindness, with intentionality. So jump in the conversation. I think you'll really enjoy this interview.
Welcome to the Art of Raising Humans.
The Art of Raising Humans is a podcast designed to support, equip, and encourage parents on how to create long-lasting, deeply connected relationships with their kids that's free from fear and shame. Come join us on the journey. Hello and welcome to the Art of Raising Humans. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Sarah.
And once again, we have another Sarah that's going to join us. I know a few weeks ago, if you listen to the podcast, we had author Sarah Moore of Peaceful Discipline on the podcast. And man, we just love Sarah's. We think Sarah's
I love
awesome.
Sarah Moore too. I know Sarah Moore. She's a friend of mine.
I know. Yes.
Sarahs are fantastic.
I know. All Sarahs know Sarahs, right? Don't all Sarahs know every Sarah? It's another Sarah with an H joining with us today, and this is Sarah Rosensweet, and she is a peaceful parent trainer, coordinator, coach. I got the joy of getting to know Sarah as we both journeyed with Dr. Laura Markham and both became coaches together with her. But I want to say welcome, Sarah.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here and nice to meet you, Sarah.
Nice to meet you too.
Yes, finally the Sarahs got to meet.
Yes.
This is fantastic. Well, I wanted to ask you, you and I, all 3 of us were just talking before we started this interview about how there's been a big backlash about this idea of peaceful parenting, some call it gentle parenting, those kind of terms, So I would love for you to kind of tell us, what does being a peaceful parent mean to you? How would you describe it?
Well, I mean, we have our 3 big ideas that we talked, that we learned from Dr. Laura, our 3 big ideas of peaceful parenting, of that, focus on our own self-regulation and trying to stay calm or calm ourselves when we're getting upset, and the focus on connection in the relationship. And what I sort of shifted my sort of take on the 3rd big idea is that kind, firm limits without punishment. And so that's really, I mean, in a nutshell, that's what peaceful parenting means to me. But what it means in practice is just really experiencing that sweetness of connection with your kids, and really being part of a family team and knowing that you have each other's backs, because your kids haven't experienced you as controlling and power tripping and arbitrary. And you've really got this really, I call it a goodwill bank, like this really nice, beefy goodwill bank account, where if you do have to, make a withdrawal once in a while of a correction, or no, you can't do that or whatever, it takes the sting out of it, because there's just such a history of trust and teamwork and working together and connection. So that's really what peaceful parenting means to me. And, it feels better, I think, than a lot of that. I was just talking to Corey, who works with me, and she said she'd been at a party and all these moms were talking about how they all have frown marks from being angry at their kids all the time. It's like, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
So you're saying peaceful parenting isn't the kids are running the house, they're going around crazy, doing whatever they want, while the parents are saying, please stop the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the backlash, is that people think peaceful parenting is just like kids do whatever they want. It's the same as permissive parenting. Yes. I just read a great quote, and let me see if I can get this right, from my friend Vivek Patel, who said that he teaches non-coercive parenting, which is very in line with what we teach as well. And he talks about it as it's deep guidance. right? And deep guidance, I think that is really a beautiful way to think about it, is you help kids understand the why, like,
Yeah.
I mean, a silly example, this just came up in my Facebook group, a little kid who didn't want to wear the outfit for her auntie's wedding, right? And I was remembering back to when my middle son, super, super strong-willed, was 9, and he didn't want to wear like the fancy black shiny dress shoes to his aunt's
Yes.
wedding.
Yeah.
And I just said, I know they're uncomfortable. I know you really don't want to wear them. And at the same time, it's really important to your auntie that everybody look this, particular way. And he was like, okay, I'll do it. And it wasn't like, if you don't wear these, then I'm going to, no iPad for a week, or like whatever the thing is. Right. So it's really like that deep guidance is really helping kids understand their place in the world and like what's important, right? And what's important to other people in their community, or, you can't do that because it's going to hurt the plant, or, whatever. It's that deep guidance of the why.
Something I didn't know she didn't say too was, it's not just saying to the kid, wear whatever you want. You pick it. It's important to your aunt, but if you don't, wear whatever you want, right? So I love that as well. It was that deep guidance of you still directing the kid towards an outcome, but it was using that connection and that influence towards helping him make that choice.
Yeah, totally.
Now, can you tell the audience, or you were telling us, you've got 3 older kids, so your kids are older than ours, and so can you kind of tell them what you're working with now?
Sure. So my daughter is 16. My 2 sons are, just about 20 and 23. And I hope I don't cry when I talk about this, but my middle son is moving out in 3 weeks. My oldest son moved out a long time ago, got his own apartment, and my middle son is moving out in a couple of weeks. And so I really am at this, like, active mothering is really drawing to a close for me. And so I am at this different phase, and I can tell you it has been such a joyful, amazing time. Like, there was a point when my kids were little, my husband and I were like, oh my gosh, we're going to have 3 teenagers at once. And it has been amazing, like really, truly amazing. Like it is not because my kids are, I say in the intro to my podcast, it's not because I'm a special unicorn or they're special unicorns. It's because they were raised with peaceful parenting. And that has made such a difference in the teen years. And I can share some kind of cool stories if you want about, like, I think how teenagers are seen and what I've experienced and how that's different.
Yeah, we would love to hear that, because I think it's a little hard to wrap your head around what does it look like with teenagers? What's going to happen if I talk to them this way and use this approach? So I'd love.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, they're going to set the scene is something my oldest son, who's 23 now, that he said when he was a teenager. He said, Mom, so many of my friends, I think he was probably 16 at the time. He said, so many of my friends ignore their parents when they call or text them. They don't tell them where they are. They don't, even some of them don't even go home at night. They stay out all night. And he said, sort of disdainfully, you're really lucky that I care what you and Dad think. But that is the crux of it, right? With peaceful parenting with teenagers, is that if they care what you think, that is so much of I was going to say battle, but it's not a battle, but that is so much of peaceful parenting teenagers, when they care what you think and you care what they think, right? Like that's the other part of it, is that you care what they think. So I just had this example.
And I would say on that, Sarah, the reason why they care what you think, because you spent a lot of time caring about what they thought, right? So you modeled it and you journeyed with them on. So they're just like returning the favor of what you've already been doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I talked about the Goodwill Bank before, we take their preferences into account whenever possible, try to make things work out, look for those win-win solutions.
Yes.
We're not arbitrary, controlling. Punishment will take you down that road of like, you're causing them pain on purpose. So why would they care what you think, right?
Yes.
Trying to manipulate them and control them through taking away the things that they love. Like that is exact opposite road of getting teenagers who care what you think. So my husband and I went on vacation for a week by ourselves in January, and we left the 19-year-old and 16-year-old home together. And my daughter, my 16-year-old, told me before we went that she had been invited to a party, and that was going to happen while we were gone, like on the Saturday night or something. And I said, well, whose party is it? And she said, this girl that at my school that I don't know very well. And I said, are your other friends invited? Like the friends that she hangs out with that I know? And she said, no, they're not invited. They wouldn't be going. And I said, I'm really uncomfortable with this. I said, so there are 3 things. Dad and I are not going to be around for if you were getting in, if something were to happen and you needed like a rescue or, us to, help you out somehow, we would be out of the country. Your friends aren't going to be there and you don't know this girl very well. And I said, if one of those things was different, I would feel really okay with you going to the party, but I feel really uncomfortable about it. And I don't think it's a good idea. Notice how I didn't say you can't go, right? Yeah. I didn't say you can't go because whenever you tell a human, give a command, there are two choices are resist or obey. Right? That's literally the choices when you give a command. Yeah. And teenagers generally will pick resist when you, especially strong-willed ones, when you give a command. So I did not say you can't go to the party, but I laid out for her my thinking about it. She's like, yeah, you're right. I won't go. And she didn't go. Like she didn't sneak out. It's that influence piece that we were talking about, right? Like the influence, I think we were talking about it before we started recording, but that when you actually have influence with your teenagers, that's what makes it so much easier. Is she listened to me and she thought, yeah, that's probably not a good idea, Yeah. So that's one example.
Well, it's a beautiful picture, Sarah, of her. You came in with just open-handedly, not close-fisted, and you came in and presented just another perspective and some other things to consider that I'm sure she probably hadn't considered some of those, right?
Yeah, and so, it made sense to her once I laid it out.
And then you're trusting that once she takes that information into account, that you too, the word we like to use a lot is co-create, is then you were able to co-create an outcome that was a win-win for both of you guys. Instead of it just being a win-lose to where we want to know for certain, we're going to tell her she can't go. Oh, now we feel better while we're on vacation when really she could sneak out and do whatever she wants.
She totally could have gone. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or it could have been a lose where she's like, I'm going to go no matter what. You can't stop me, and then it hurts your relationship and she goes and feels shame about all that stuff too, So
totally.
It's just a beautiful outcome there.
Yeah. And the other thing I think we want to remember too is that it's that why again, like explaining the why is she wants her life to work out. Right? She doesn't want something bad to happen to her. Right. Like she and teenagers are not, because of their underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, they're not the best at thinking these things through. But once you do like help them think through things, then they often do want to make the right choice.
Yeah.
And it just seems like I can tell you've laid the groundwork in your relationship that she could hear your concerns. It didn't feel like you're approaching her to control her, to manage her life. Because of course, teenagers, they want to be making decisions. They don't want someone controlling them. That doesn't feel good. None of us do. Yeah. Right. And so I love the way you came in and said, hey, here's some thoughts. And because of the relationship you've worked at, she was able to hear those thoughts and consider them and make the choice.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, and there's just like little things too, like my middle son, who's 19, he was, I told you before we started taping that I live on an island. So it's really hard to get takeout. That's one of the things, like we saved so much money over the last however many years because ordering pizza was just literally not an option. But there's this place that I love that's about, I don't know, it's about a half an hour drive from the ferry docks. And it's this awesome jerk chicken takeout that I love so much. And my son was going to work. And he works in construction and he works different places in the city. And I said, hey, are you going to be anywhere near Gerrard Square Mall? So anyone in Toronto, now you know where the best takeout in the city is. And I said, are you going to be anywhere near Gerrard Square Mall? And he said, no, why? And I said, oh, I was hoping you could go and, get me some jerk chicken. And he was like, I can go. Like, I'm not going to be near there, but I can go. And I was like, are you sure? He's like, Mom, I said, I can go and get you the chicken. And I was like, okay, thanks. It made him get home an hour later than he would have if he hadn't gone to get me the chicken, right? And just like a little thing like that, I think is so indicative of like how he was raised, right? There's a beautiful article called Model Graciousness. And if you look that up, I think it's Visible Child. It is really encapsulates the sort of the spirit of peaceful parenting, where we model to our children the people that we want them to be. She talks in the article, y'all should check it out if you don't know it, but she talks about the control. Often, you have, like, you spilled this milk, you have to clean it up, and get, parents who get in like a standoff with their kids about, you made this mess, you have to clean it up kind of thing. And that control piece, even if they're being peaceful, they think, well, I'm teaching them responsibility and blah, blah. And she says, no, you're teaching them like the opposite of graciousness. So, even your child for that moment says, I'm not going to clean the milk up. Maybe they're feeling some shame around having spilled it, whatever. Like, okay, I'll clean it up for you. I know you'll help me next time, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that model graciousness piece of like doing things for people. And also, sorry, I'm on a bit of a roll now, but the whole thing of, people say you should never do anything for your child that they can do for themselves. Yep. What if I had raised my son with that and I said, can you go get me some jerk chicken? Do you think he would have said, I will go an hour out of my way to go and get you jerk chicken? Mom, you go in the city and get your own jerk chicken,
That's right. You can do that, Mom. Get your car and get over there. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
So, all right. So I was thinking as you were talking, I love this. And that would be, my kids aren't as old as yours. And so that's where I want to go. So what if you're a parent and, is it too late? I mean, when can you
never
jump
too late.
And what does that look like? Because what did you do to lead to this beautiful relationship you have now? Have you always parented this way? Do you know parents who switch in the middle and it still works out? How's that?
So I have always parented this way. I was lucky enough to be exposed to Alfie Kohn and his work before I even had kids. My sister had recommended a book to me from a teaching perspective called Punished by Rewards, which is the book that he wrote before he wrote Unconditional Parenting. So I already had this like stuff floating around in my head about rewards and punishment, right? So I'd already thought about that a lot because of reading his work. And then I remember when my oldest son was when we practiced attachment parenting. So, really very watching the child's cues, trying to like respond from, and by the way, you don't have to do all the things that Dr. Sears says to have an attached child. But, I did try to follow a lot of that stuff when my kids were younger. And so I really had spent 18 months like creating this bond with my child, right? And meeting his needs and responding to his cries. And I remember he was crying about something and a family friend was nearby. And she said, I went to go to him and she said, oh, don't pick him up. He's just trying to manipulate you.
Yes.
Right? Like don't. And I was like, that is so weird. Like, and I just started to notice around that age, people starting to say things about, their kids are manipulating you, or you're going to spoil him, or so I really just, I recognized then that this was a little bit different, right? That this was like a little bit of a different way of parenting. And back then, so he was born in 2001. There really was nothing in the way of books about peaceful parenting. But there was a magazine called Mothering Magazine, which was kind of like a hippie, like a hippie natural living magazine. And there was like the only place that I really found anything that sort of had the peaceful vibe. But I have to say, like it suits me pretty well naturally. Like I have a pretty sturdy nervous system. And I don't get that triggered by my kids. Where I've had to do the work is with my husband. So I do know about doing the work around self-regulation and triggers, and all of the good news is all the peaceful parenting tools and strategies work for any relationship. But so for me it really was
your marriage sounds like our marriage. Like, what's up with these Sarahs being so good at this?
Oh my gosh.
And then them marrying husbands who need some help.
Well, sometimes my husband, like, he has always been in theory on board with peaceful parenting, but self-regulation has been a little harder for him than it has been for me. But you know what? That has been a blessing as well, because if I didn't see him and how hard he worked to be a peaceful parent, I wouldn't have as much empathy for the parents that I work with, right? Because it is easier for me, and I know it's easier for me, but it's not easy for him. And so that has really that's helped me help other parents too.
Yes. So it sounds like you came into this, you were wanting to do this. How did you help him buy into it? Like to come on board.
So I never had to help him buy into it, because he did, as I said, like in theory, like he did believe we shouldn't yell at the kids. Like he believed in no punishments. Like he really but sometimes he would get triggered. And what I learned after many, 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 many years of doing it wrong was that it didn't work to correct him in the moment.
Yes.
It would only make things worse if I tried to intervene in the moment. And I'm not talking about abuse. I'm just talking about like
Yeah.
ordinary, like dad getting upset about, the mess left in the living room or like, whatever the thing is. And that, really to it's funny because our mentor that we share, Dr. Laura, I remember I was talking to her one day and I said, I really have no trouble being compassionate with my kids when they're having like a meltdown or a tantrum or whatever. But like my husband, on the other hand, I find it really hard. And she said, well, what if you could try to find that same compassion for him that you do for your kids when he's, getting upset about something? And I tried it. And it was like I remember the day he was leaving for work. There was like, we were in the mud room. I was saying goodbye to him. There was kind of like someone's sweatshirt that had been like on the floor for 2 days or whatever. And he was, feeling stressed about heading, whatever his day was going to be. And he was like, this sweatshirt has been here for 2 days. And normally I would have said, oh, come on, it's not a big deal. Why are you getting so upset about that? Right? The opposite of empathy.
Yeah.
And instead I said, oh, I know it really bothers you. When there's a mess, I'll get the kid in question to come and pick up their sweatshirt. And I saw his shoulders just go, like he felt seen, right? Like it's so hard to empathize when you don't agree, but you have to.
Yeah.
Oh, that's been our journey, and it's been, every day, every year, his process has gotten better, and he's almost perfect now that we're almost done with active parenting.
Yes, I know, we're almost there. I think I may have shared this on your podcast when I was on there, but the one time I remember Sarah showing me that compassion was, we were pretty new into it. The kids were really young. And I remember I was just going at it with Abby. Abby was probably 4 or 5. And I was just yelling, just really mad at her. And I came back out and Sarah was folding laundry in the living room. And she just looked at me and she kindly said, you realize what you're doing in there is not what we teach parents to do. And then I just said to her, oh, I know that, but this is not stopping. Like, I'm going to finish what I'm doing and then I will come back. And I would love to hear all of your great ideas about how I could have done that better. But in that moment, she realized like the train had left the station and this was not going to change right now. But later on, we would follow up. And there was this trust in the marriage that we would always follow up. We'd have like a little powwow, a little debriefing at the end of the evening. And typically then that's when she would say, you could have tried this, or could have tried. And then I'd be like, oh, that actually would have worked fantastic. I wasn't in my prefrontal cortex. I couldn't possibly see that. But now that I'm calm, I can see it now.
Yeah. I mean, that's the problem, right? Is like when you're stuck in fight or flight, the person in front of you looks like the enemy, whether it's your child or your partner. And I highly recommend the walking away. Like that's what I really found that's helped us a lot, is that we'll say like, let's talk about this one later when we're both calm. And half the time you don't even need to go back and talk about it because you were only fighting because you were fighting. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't even content there. Like it was just like you were both triggered. And then once you're calm, like, oh, that wasn't really a big deal.
Yeah.
And so what do you, if you're a parent who's like, well, that's been my story, how do I switch? What do I do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, you mean if you have a partner who has trouble with regulation, going for lots of empathy and connection, and really just saying like, how can I support you? Like, I know that you don't want to yell at the kids. What can I do? And this is like conversations outside of the situations I think that are happening. And again, I want to say we're not talking about abusive behavior. We're just talking about, conventional parenting practices. So just talking to them about it outside. And I remember once, I think one of my sons had like snapped at my husband and then he snapped back. And I always feel like we should be the grown-ups, like, that we.
That's a pretty good policy that you should always be the grown-ups.
Ideally.
And so in the past, I might have said to him like, why are you talking to him like that or something like that? But instead, when my son left the room, I said, oh, I bet that really hurt your feelings when he said that. And my husband was like, yeah. And then he could, from me acknowledging like you lashed out because your feelings were hurt, he could hear, what he could have done better the next time.
Yeah. Well, and if you could follow up with that, I loved what Sarah was asking earlier. For those parents that you're coaching, Sarah, who maybe are listening to this and how also that you've worked with, who are like, oh man, the kids now are 11, 12, 13, 14, and we've been doing this power struggle thing for a long time, punishment, consequence, but we want to shift. What do you tell them when they are feeling like, oh, it's too late? I hear her kids sound awesome. Like these kids, like
my kids won't do that.
Yes, my kids are never. What's typically your?
Okay, I love that because I remember now Sarah did ask the question and we got on another topic, so I love that you brought it back because it's never too late. First of all, I think anyone listening, even if they don't have a great relationship with their own parents or they're estranged, even. There is a part of them that really wishes that they could have a good relationship with their parent, that they could be seen by their parent, that they could feel like, and I'm talking to us grownups, right?
Yeah.
That they could feel connected to their parent. And that feeling never goes away. And even the prickliest teenager wants to be seen, wants to be loved, wants you to be proud of them, wants to feel connected to you. Like it does not, I would put a lot of money on the fact that you can't find one teenager who deep down doesn't want to have a good relationship with their parent. So with that in mind, the first place to start is always connection. You can't make any headway with teenagers unless they start to feel more connected to you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, things like, getting their favorite takeout or, really thinking about how can you, it's almost like in special time, we join our children in their world. Yeah. How can you really show up for your teen and really show an interest, without being intrusive? I'm not talking about being intrusive, but like show an interest in their life and what they're doing and invite them to do things with you. There's a really wonderful book. This is actually a great recommendation. It's called Staying Connected to Your Teenager by Michael Riera, Riera.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how teenagers will reject you 4 out of 5 times you ask them to do something. Mm-hmm. And so the key is ask 5 times as much.
Yeah.
So, instead of like, I've asked them 3 times and they said no, keep asking, right? They are going to say no a lot. Even my kids will say no. Like, do you want my husband last night said to my daughter, do you want to go for a bike ride? No, I don't want to go for a bike ride. The other one, my older one went for a bike ride with him, but she feels connected to her dad. She didn't want to go for a bike ride. She was doing something else. So, keep asking, keep trying, regulate yourself. That is huge. Really work on your own. Yelling is like one of the things that's really going to make a teenager build a wall around their heart to you.
Yes.
So really work on your own regulation, even if it means you have to walk out every time things are starting to get heated. You can tell them ahead of time. Like if we're starting to get upset with each other, we're going to take a break and we'll come back to it when we're both feeling calm. So really working on the connection piece and the self-regulation piece. And even if you tend to get like the self-regulation piece is important with teenagers, even if it's not yelling, but even if like something happens at school and you think it's unfair, like if you have too big of a reaction, they're not going to tell you stuff, right? Yeah. Because they don't want the drama. So even if you're like on their side, like, I can't believe that thing your friend did that. They're going to just be like, whoa, I don't need the drama. Like
exactly.
I'm not going to talk to you about that. Right.
Yeah.
So point. Train yourself to underreact. Like, oh, interesting. Tell me more about that, right? Exactly, inside you might be like, oh, I can't believe that. That's terrible. But like, don't have those big reactions. So self-regulation and connection, always the place to start. It could be that your teenager also maybe needs some other supports. Like if they're experiencing a lot of like, depression or anxiety or having any challenges in that area, you might also need some, maybe some mental health support, some therapy for them or family therapy.
There was a third one that when we were talking before we got on this, I loved it. We were asking for like your top 3 points, right? And I know throughout this time, if you're listening, what Sarah's given you is number 1 was this idea of self-regulation, which is so important. And we've talked a lot about it too, but it has to begin with you. And then number 2, when we were talking, you were talking about how you view the kid in that moment being so important. And so could you tell us more about
the
that?
mindset? This mindset piece, I cannot overstate how important it is to have the mindset that your child or teenager or partner wants to be good, right? Yep. Nobody wants to be a jerk. If they are being a jerk, it is, and I say a jerk in quotations. If they are being a jerk, it's because there's something going on that is, they're under-resourced, they're having a hard time, they can't manage for, whatever reason. With little kids, it's obvious, like, oh, they're hungry, like they're having a meltdown because they're hungry or whatever. But like for older kids, maybe someone was mean to them at school that day. Maybe there's some sort of misunderstanding. So anytime anyone is acting out of alignment with their being their best self for somebody that they feel connected with, that they're in relationship with, if they're acting out of alignment, there's something else going on, right? And I always really believe like that everyone's doing the best they can, and that that kids do want to be good. So if you don't believe that in your heart, if you really you're like, okay, well, what I see sometimes, Kyle and Sarah, I'm sure you see this too, is people who believe in peaceful parenting until their child does something really bad.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, well, it was good up until a point, but now they need a punishment, right? They did this bad thing and now you need no, never. Right. Like there's always a reason why, even if the reason is lack of understanding or willpower or impulse control, or, whatever it is, like they always want to be good. They don't.
Well, and what you're doing there is you're actually modeling what you hope they think about you on your worst days too.
Yeah.
Those kind of, since I'm the one between the two of us who gets dysregulated more, is I really want to really believe that about them. So in the days when I'm not being the parent that I want to be, that they're stopping and thinking, Dad wants to be good in this moment. Dad wants to succeed. This isn't who Dad wants to be. And what we've seen, at least so far with our older two, their ability to see that and then call the better thing out of me has been really, really helpful.
Well, that's lovely.
Yeah, because then they're able to turn it around. Yeah.
I want to highlight too that it doesn't, like, kids will do things like, quote, on purpose that are like the wrong thing.
Sure.
But they still want to be good. And those things are often like this sort of acting out, or, looking right at you and doing something they're not supposed to do. Yep. Those are what we call maladaptive attempts to get their needs met, right?
Yes.
Yep. Like I remember this story of this client I was working with. They just had a new baby and a 4-year-old. They have a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old was having a really hard time. And the mom and the 4-year-old and the baby were all at a crosswalk waiting for the light to change. And the 4-year-old just stopped and looked at his mom and hauled off and kicked her in the shin.
Oh,
and,
man.
Out of nowhere, right? And she started to get upset. And then she remembered what we talked about, that he wanted to be good, and something else was probably going on. So she knelt down and she looked at him and she thought to herself, what could this be about? And attention, right? Attention is often one of those things where that kids are, they act out negatively to get the attention that they need. And she said to him, "Did you want my attention? Is that why you kicked me?" And he said, "Yes." Like he was, sort of crying and sniffling. And because he realized he'd done something wrong. Yeah. And she said, "You can just tell me when you need attention." Yeah. And he said, "I forgot what it was called."
Yes.
So that's it's awesome. Just like sometimes kids will do something awful, like just kick you in the shin for no reason, but it's really, there is a need under there, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm even thinking when I yell at the kids, I do it on purpose. I do it. I'm totally, but I actually am thinking in the moment, I just feel like I can't do the better way, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just caught up in that moment. I'm being reactive. And so that's how I see it. When they do that to me, I think it's the same thing. When I'm doing it, I can watch myself do it. I know I'm yelling at them. I know I'm not practicing what I preach in that moment and being kind of hypocritical. I know all that as I'm doing it, but I actually wish I could do it a different way.
Well, I would argue that you are, your brain has been taken over by the fight, flight, or freeze. So even if there's an awareness, it's still, the awareness is through a lens of your fight response, right? Yep. So yes, you can kind of watch yourself doing it, but you're not in your thinking brain 100%. Or your calm brain, right? So there still is it's awareness combined with a lack of control that comes through seeing things through that fight lens.
Yep.
Yeah, and children get in that exact same place. Even when, when parents say, you know better, you have those moments where you think, what are you doing? You know better than this. And the child still does it or did something. And they do. They have, but in that moment, that's just not the space in their brain. They're not there. They're not in that part that has that self-control and consequence and thinking ahead. And they're not in that part. And we have to, just like it happens to us, it happens to them.
Yeah. So Sarah, could you tell, what is the population you love helping, that you love to coach and serve?
Oh, I mean, I just love coaching parents who maybe have kids who are a little bit more challenging or a little bit extra, sometimes we call them, and they really believe in this. Actually, this now I think it's kind of too pop. They believe in it, but they're having a hard time feeling like it's working.
Yeah.
And I also love parents. I've had a number of couples who are just brand new to peaceful parenting. Like, I don't even know how they found me, but they are just, they drink it in like a sponge, no one's ever told them before, like, you can be kind to your kids. You can, like this one dad was like, so you mean basically I'm just like kind to him? And I'm like, yeah, like you treat him like a person. Yeah.
I think some parents feel like they actually need permission.
Yeah.
They have these other things that are running in their mind on what a parent should do. And maybe that's how they were parented, and they don't actually know. And it actually feels relieving to them. And they love to have that permission given of doing it differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that I always say, like, what would you do if you weren't afraid of what other people would think, or that you have to like teach a lesson? Like, what if you could just really react from a place of love and like, oh, this is what this kid needs is a hug, not like to take something away. But so often we're afraid that if we do that, they're not going to learn the lesson, or other people are going to judge us. Yep. I mean, I will say one thing that made this easier for me is that I was blessed with like a giant amount of not caring what other people think, which is like, I knew how I wanted to parent. Yes. I didn't care if my mother-in-law thought it was wrong. I didn't care if my neighbor thought it was wrong. Like, I knew that I was doing the right thing for my kids. But I know a lot of people don't have that. And believe me, I'm not that secure in every single area of my life. Yeah. But I knew this was the right thing to do. And I know some parents just really feel like, is this the right thing to do? Like, my brother's kids are so much quieter at the family dinner table than mine. Yeah. Well, your brother's kids are probably afraid of what's going to happen if they're not, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's why I love having you on, Sarah, is I think for those people who are struggling with that confidence, a great way to get that confidence is to have some support through coaching. Yeah. And so I don't think Sarah and I are put on this earth to help every parent in the world. I think there's certain parents that will seek us out, certain parents who would love to seek you out, and it's all about getting the right fit, Yeah. So I loved having you on because I want them to hear your voice and hear how you're helping parents. It's just super encouraging to know there's this whole group of people who, like you said, you started back in 2001, 2002. That's about the time that we hadn't had kids yet, but Sarah was really diving into it. And Sarah was coming home saying things like, I'm not teaching parents how to spank or do timeouts. I'm teaching them other things. And I'd be like, my mind was like, just blown. Like, how could you not be teaching that stuff? And so it was slowly seeping in there, but it's been really encouraging to meet wonderful people like you along the way, and other coaches that we've gotten to speak to who are passionate about supporting these parents. So we want every parent who's listening to know you're not alone, and it's never too late. And if you don't have that confidence that Sarah just described, like that's why we're here. So to help you get that, because we have done it. We've been doing it. I mean, Sarah's been doing it with her kids for about 20 years now. And we've been doing it with our kids now for over a decade. So it's like, it's real. We're seeing the fruit, and we're coming as honest, vulnerable people to tell you that we could not have done this without our own help. I mean, I know Dr. Markham was very supportive to me and to you, and just giving us confidence. I mean, there's so many times where I did not believe what Sarah was saying, and then we could talk to Dr. Markham and she would just agree with Sarah. And then
love that.
I'd be like, fine. Dr. Markham agrees with you too, right? So in saying all that, I want to review the three things you said for our audience. Was number one, the self-regulation piece of making sure I'm calming myself down. Two was the mindset, shifting my mind to where I'm seeing the kid and believing that they're wanting to do good in that moment, that they're wanting to succeed, and they just need your help, right? And then the third piece was just so important, the connection piece of making sure, whether it's a little kid or a teenager, you are finding ways to get into their world and just connect with them in it. And it's interesting, all three of those work in marriage. All three of those work in friendship. So if you just want better relationships across the board, just do those three in every relationship, I
had a client once who couldn't believe how far-reaching the effects were, the work that she was doing as a peaceful parent. And she said to me, I'm not only a better parent, I'm a better dentist. She was a dentist.
Yes.
She said, like, practicing this stuff has like changed all areas of my life. And I find that to be really true for most people who do practice it. It really affects, their work relationships, their friendships, their marriage. But I will say, don't peaceful parent your dog, because my dog does not listen to me. I raise my dog the same way as my kids. Yes. She does not listen to me at all. Like, I'll be like, Emmy, come here. She just looks at me and walks the other way.
She's not being very considerate, not being very gracious. Well,
no.
So how can our listeners connect with your stuff and your work, Sarah?
Yeah, so I have a brand new website at reimaginepeacefulparenting.com. You can still get there from sararosensweet.com, but we've sort of done a rebrand because I do have other people who work with me as well. We have a page of free resources on the website, including my free How to Stop Yelling at Your Kids course. My podcast is on there. Coaching is on there. If you're interested in coaching, anyone can book a free 20-minute consult with me to see if I could help you, or one of my coaches could help you, and to see if we're a good fit. So it's all there at reimaginepeacefulparenting.com.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
And could you send me the link for our listeners to that visible child thing? I want to make sure we'll include that in the notes, and we'll also put maybe that information on the Staying Connected with Your Teenager book as well, because both would be really, really great resources. So Sarah, it was so great to have you on.
Thank you.
Great to be having this conversation. I love that we are reaching more families with this, and with the real peaceful parenting, right? Or real gentle parenting, whatever, not this weird fake version of it that people are having a backlash against on Instagram.
Yes. So for our listeners, if you loved this, please go and rate this podcast, give a review, and definitely check out Sarah Rosensweet's stuff on Facebook and also on her website. And we'll include all those links below. So I hope this was helpful to you in changing how you see parenting, and we hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening.
The Art of Raising Humans podcast should not be considered or used as counseling, but for educational purposes only.